The morning rush at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport was in full swing when Rebecca Williams stepped out of her black sedan at the departures curb. She slammed the door harder than necessary, already irritated that her driver had taken what she considered the wrong route to the airport. At 43, Rebecca was used to getting her way. As a senior vice president at a major consulting firm, she commanded respect in boardrooms and expected the same level of service everywhere she went. The automatic doors of Terminal C whooshed open as she strode through, pulling her designer luggage behind her. Her phone was pressed to her ear, and she was speaking loudly enough for half the terminal to hear her conversation about quarterly projections and client meetings. She barely glanced at the people around her as she made her way to the check-in area. "I specifically requested first class when my assistant booked this flight," Rebecca snapped at the airline representative behind the counter. The young man, who couldn't have been older than 25, looked at his computer screen with the patient expression of someone who dealt with difficult passengers every day. "I understand your frustration, ma'am, but I'm showing that first. Class was already sold out when your booking was made," he explained politely. "However, we do have you in premium economy, which includes priority boarding and extra legroom." Rebecca's face flushed red. "Do you know who I am? I fly over 200,000 miles a year with this airline. This is completely unacceptable." The representative maintained his professional composure. "I apologize for any inconvenience. Let me see if there have been any last-minute cancellations in first class." His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, but after a moment he shook his head. "I'm sorry, but first class is completely full today." "This is ridiculous," Rebecca muttered, snatching her boarding pass from the counter. She didn't thank the representative or acknowledge his attempts to help. Instead, she turned on her heel and headed toward security, her expensive heels clicking angrily against the polished floor. The security line moved slowly, which only added to Rebecca's growing frustration. She checked her watch repeatedly and sighed loudly whenever the line stalled. When she finally made it through the scanner, she was already 15 minutes later than she'd planned to be at her gate. Gate B12 was buzzing with activity when Rebecca arrived. Families were gathered around charging stations, business travelers were typing on laptops, and flight attendants were preparing for boarding. Rebecca found a seat in the corner and immediately called her assistant. "Jennifer, call the airline and demand an explanation for why I wasn't given first class," she said without greeting, "and make sure they know I'm considering switching to a different carrier. This level of service is completely unacceptable." As she spoke, Rebecca noticed the flight crew doing their pre-boarding checks. The lead flight attendant was a woman who appeared to be in her late 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun and a warm smile as she spoke with her colleagues. Rebecca couldn't help but notice the woman's slight accent when she spoke to the gate agent about passenger manifests. When boarding was called, Rebecca pushed her way to the front of the premium economy line, despite several passengers already waiting ahead of her. She flashed her boarding pass at the gate agent with an impatient expression. "Ma'am, we're currently boarding first class and our platinum members," the gate agent explained kindly. "Premium economy will be called in just a few minutes." "I should be in first class," Rebecca said loudly enough for other passengers to hear. "There's obviously been some kind of mistake with my booking." The gate agent checked her screen again. "I show you're confirmed in premium economy, row 8. That section will board very shortly." Rebecca stepped aside with obvious annoyance, tapping her foot as she watched first-class passengers file onto the plane. When premium economy was finally called, she was the first person down the jet bridge. The aircraft was a newer model with mood lighting and updated interiors. Rebecca made her way to row 8, dragging her oversized carry-on behind her. When she reached her seat, she immediately tried to shove her bag into the overhead compartment, but it clearly didn't fit properly. "Excuse me, can I help you with that?" The voice belonged to the flight attendant Rebecca had noticed earlier. Up close, she could see the woman's name tag read, Carmen Santos. Her smile was genuine, and she approached with the kind of professional helpfulness that came from years of experience. "This compartment is obviously too small," Rebecca said, continuing to push at her bag. "I've never had this problem before." Carmen stepped closer to assess the situation. "Sometimes these compartments can be tricky. Would you mind if I take a look? I might be able to help you rearrange things to make it fit." "I've been flying for 20 years, Rebecca snapped. "I think I know how to put a bag in an overhead compartment." Carmen maintained her pleasant demeanor. Of course, I just noticed that your bag might fit better if we position it differently. These newer planes have slightly different compartment sizes than our older aircraft. Rebecca turned to face Carmen directly for the first time, and her expression immediately hardened. She looked Carmen up and down with obvious disapproval, taking in her appearance and listening more carefully to her accent. Maybe the compartments would be fine if they were designed by people who actually understand how Americans travel, Rebecca said coldly. Instead of whoever designed this mess. Carmen's smile faltered slightly, but she maintained her professionalism. I understand your frustration with the fit. Would you like me to check if there's space in another compartment nearby? What I'd like, Rebecca said, raising her voice slightly, is for someone who actually speaks proper English to help me. Maybe someone who's actually from this country and understands customer service. The passengers nearby began to take notice of the exchange. A businessman in the row behind Rebecca looked up from his phone, and a mother traveling with 2 young children glanced over with concern. Carmen took a small step back, her training kicking in. She'd dealt with difficult passengers before, but the edge in Rebecca's voice and the nature of her comments set off warning bells. Ma'am, I'm here to help all of our passengers have a comfortable flight. Let me see what I can do about finding space for your bag. Don't call me ma'am, Rebecca snapped. And maybe if this airline hired people who were qualified for the job instead of just filling quotas, we wouldn't have these problems. The comment hung in the air like a dark cloud. Carmen's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the hurt underneath before she quickly composed herself again. She'd worked for the airline for 6 years and had encountered prejudice before, but it never got easier. I'll find a solution for your bag, Carmen said quietly, her voice steady despite the obvious tension. Please take your seat, and I'll be right back. As Carmen walked toward the front of the plane to speak with her colleagues, Rebecca settled into her seat with a satisfied expression, as if she'd won some kind of victory. She didn't notice the uncomfortable glances from her fellow passengers or the way conversations had quieted around her. The stage was set for what would become a flight that none of them would ever forget. The plane had been in the air for almost 2 hours when Rebecca pressed the call button above her seat for the 3rd time. She'd already complained about the temperature, demanded extra peanuts, and asked to be moved to first class twice. Each time, Carmen had responded with professional courtesy, but Rebecca could see the strain starting to show around the flight attendants' eyes. Carmen appeared at Rebecca's row with the same patient smile she'd maintained since boarding. How can I help you? I need another drink, Rebecca announced loudly, not bothering to look up from her phone. And this time, make it a double. This flight is taking forever. Carmen glanced at the small pile of empty bottles on Rebecca's tray table. The woman had already consumed 3 small bottles of wine during the short time they'd been airborne. As a trained flight attendant, Carmen knew the signs of someone who'd had too much to drink, and Rebecca was displaying several of them. I'd be happy to get you something else to drink, Carmen offered diplomatically. We have coffee, soft drinks, or water. Our flight is actually making good time today. Rebecca's head snapped up, her eyes slightly unfocused. I didn't ask for your opinion about the flight time. I asked for another drink. Are you going to do your job or not? The passengers in nearby rows were starting to pay attention again. A teenage boy traveling alone put in his earbuds and tried to ignore the situation. An elderly couple in the row across the aisle exchanged worried glances. Carmen kept her voice calm and professional. I understand you'd like another alcoholic beverage, but federal regulations require us to monitor alcohol service during flight. I think it might be best if we got you something else to drink right now. Federal regulations? Rebecca laughed harshly. Let me guess, you probably don't even understand what federal regulations are. Did they even teach you about American laws wherever you came from? The comment cut through the cabin noise like a knife. Several passengers turned to stare openly. Now. A businessman 2 rows up stopped typing on his laptop and looked back with obvious disapproval. Carmen felt her cheeks burn, but she maintained her composure. Ma'am, I'm familiar with all the regulations that govern airline service. I'd be happy to explain our alcohol service policy if you'd like. Stop calling me ma'am, Rebecca snapped, her voice getting louder, and stop pretending you belong here. This is America, and American passengers deserve to be served by Americans. A woman traveling with her young daughter quickly covered the child's ears. The businessman who'd been watching stood up partially in his seat, as if considering whether to intervene. Carmen took a deep breath. In her 6 years with the airline, she'd dealt with drunk passengers, angry passengers, and even a few who'd made inappropriate comments about her background. But Rebecca was combining all of these problems into one increasingly volatile situation. I was born in San Antonio, Texas, Carmen said quietly, her professional training warring with her desire to defend herself. I've been with this airline for 6 years, and I'm certified in all aspects of flight safety and customer service. Rebecca stood up unsteadily, swaying slightly as the plane hit a small patch of turbulence. I don't care where you claim you're from. I can hear it in your voice. You people come here and take jobs that should go to real Americans. The cabin had gone almost completely quiet now. Even the usual sounds of passengers talking, reading, and moving around had stopped. Everyone was watching the confrontation unfold. You people? Carmen repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. She could feel her heart racing, but years of customer service training kept her from walking away. Don't act like you don't know what I mean, Rebecca said, gesturing wildly with her hands. Coming here, working for cheap, taking opportunities away from people who actually belong in this country. A man in his 50s sitting across the aisle finally spoke up. Lady, that's enough. She's just doing her job. Rebecca whirled around to face him, nearly losing her balance. Mind your own business. I'm a paying customer and I have every right to expect proper service. Proper service doesn't include listening to racist garbage, the man replied firmly. Several other passengers murmured in agreement. Rebecca's face turned red with anger. Racist? I'm not racist. I just believe in putting Americans first. If that makes me racist, then this country has bigger problems than I thought. Carmen tried to de-escalate the situation. Why don't I get you some water and a snack? Sometimes that helps with air sickness. I'm not airsick, Rebecca shouted, causing a baby several rows away to start crying. I'm sick of being treated like a second-class citizen on an American airline by someone who probably shouldn't even be working here. The elderly woman across the aisle leaned toward her husband. Should we call someone? She whispered, but her voice carried in the quiet cabin. Carmen looked toward the front of the plane where her colleague Lisa was dealing with another passenger. She caught Lisa's eye and gave a subtle signal that meant she needed backup. Lisa immediately started making her way down the aisle. Ma'am, I think it would be best if you return to your seat, Carmen said, trying to maintain control of the situation. I'll speak with the captain about your concerns. The captain? Rebecca laughed bitterly. Great. Let me guess. He's probably not American either. This whole airline is probably run by foreigners now. Lisa arrived at the scene just as Rebecca was gesturing wildly again. Is everything okay here? Lisa asked, though it was obvious everything was far from okay. No, everything is not okay, Rebecca announced to the entire cabin. I'm being discriminated against by staff who shouldn't even be in this country. Lisa, a blonde woman in her 30s from Minnesota, looked confused. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice and return to your seat. You're disturbing other passengers. Rebecca looked Lisa up and down, taking in her appearance and listening to her accent. Apparently satisfied with what she saw and heard, Rebecca's tone changed slightly. Finally, someone who looks like they actually belong here, Rebecca said. Maybe you can get me the drink I've been asking for. Your colleague here seems to think she can make up her own rules. Lisa glanced at Carmen, who gave her a look that conveyed the entire situation in an instant. I'll need to check with my colleague about what you've been served already, Lisa said diplomatically. I've had 3 small bottles of wine, Rebecca said proudly, and I want another one. I paid for this ticket and I deserve proper service. Lisa and Carmen exchanged another look. 3 bottles in 2 hours, combined with Rebecca's obvious intoxication and increasingly aggressive behavior, made it clear that no more alcohol could be served. "I'm sorry, but we can't serve you any more alcohol at this time," Lisa said firmly. "Federal aviation regulations are very clear about this." Rebecca's expression darkened. "So you're ganging up on me now? This is unbelievable. I'm going to report both of you when we land." She swayed again as she tried to point at both flight attendants, and Carmen instinctively reached out to steady her. Rebecca jerked away from the contact as if she'd been burned. "Don't touch me," Rebecca hissed. "Keep your hands off me." The situation was spiraling out of control, and Carmen could see that Rebecca was beyond reasoning with. What had started as a simple service issue had become something much more serious. The flight still had 3 hours to go. 20 minutes had passed since the confrontation over the drinks, but Rebecca wasn't finished. She had returned to her seat as requested, but she kept pressing the call button every few minutes. Each time Carmen or Lisa responded, Rebecca would demand something unreasonable or make another inappropriate comment about the crew's qualifications. Other passengers were getting increasingly uncomfortable. Some had started recording videos on their phones, sensing that the situation might escalate further. A mother with twin toddlers asked the flight attendant if she could move to a different section of the plane, away from the disturbance. Carmen was in the galley preparing drinks for other passengers when she heard Rebecca's voice getting loud again. This time, Rebecca had gotten up from her seat and was standing in the aisle, blocking the path for a passenger who was trying to return from the bathroom. "Excuse me, I need to get by," the passenger said politely. He was an older gentleman with a walking cane, clearly having difficulty standing for long periods. Rebecca looked at him with annoyance. "Well, maybe you should have thought about that before you got up. I'm having a conversation here." The man looked confused. Rebecca wasn't having a conversation with anyone. She was standing alone in the aisle, swaying slightly and talking to herself about the poor service on the flight. Carmen quickly made her way down the aisle. "Ma'am, you need to return to your seat so other passengers can move freely through the cabin." Rebecca turned around, her face flushed with anger and alcohol. "There you are again. Are you following me now? This is harassment." "I'm just doing my job," Carmen said calmly, though inside she was feeling increasingly anxious about Rebecca's behavior. "Please return to your seat for everyone's safety." "My safety?" Rebecca laughed loudly. "The only thing threatening my safety is having unqualified people working on this plane. I bet you didn't even go to real flight attendant school." The elderly gentleman with the cane shifted uncomfortably, still trapped behind Rebecca. "Miss, could you please just step aside? I really need to sit down." Rebecca whirled around to face him. "Don't tell me what to do. I paid just as much for my ticket as you did. More, probably." Carmen stepped closer, trying to create space for the elderly passenger to get through. "Sir, if you'd like to step around this way, I can help you get back to your seat." As Carmen moved to guide the gentleman past Rebecca, Rebecca suddenly grabbed Carmen's arm. "I told you not to touch me, and I meant it. That goes both ways." Carmen gently pulled her arm free. "Ma'am, I wasn't touching you. I was helping another passenger." "Don't lie to me," Rebecca said, her voice getting higher and more agitated. "I saw what you did. You people always play the victim when you get caught." The phrase "you people" echoed through the cabin again, and this time multiple passengers reacted audibly. Someone in the back of the plane said, "Oh no, she didn't," loud enough for everyone to hear. A teenage girl traveling with her family started recording more obviously, holding her phone up to capture the scene. Rebecca noticed and pointed at her. "Put that phone away. You can't record me without my permission. This is America. We have privacy laws." The girl's father stood up. "Actually, we're in a public space. She can record whatever she wants." Rebecca's attention turned to the father. "Great, another person who doesn't understand how things work. What is it with people today? Nobody respects authority anymore." Carmen tried once more to redirect the situation. "Ma'am, please return to your seat. We need to keep the aisles clear for safety reasons. If you have concerns about the service, I'd be happy to take your information and pass it along to management." Management? Rebecca said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. You mean more people like you who don't belong here? I want to speak to the captain. I want to speak to someone who's actually qualified to run this airline. Lisa appeared from the front of the plane, having been summoned by another passenger. Ma'am, the captain is flying the plane right now. He can't leave the cockpit during flight. Rebecca looked Lisa up and down again, seeming to remember that she'd approved of Lisa. Early. For you seem reasonable. Can you please explain to your colleague here that American passengers deserve American service? Lisa's expression hardened. Ma'am, all of our crew members are highly trained professionals. I'm going to have to insist that you return to your seat immediately. Are you threatening me? Rebecca asked, her voice getting shrill. Because I'm the customer here. I'm the one paying your salaries. The elderly gentleman with the cane was still standing behind Rebecca, looking increasingly pale. Carmen noticed his distress and became more firm in her approach. Sir, please take my arm and I'll help you to your seat, Carmen said, stepping around Rebecca to reach the gentleman. I said don't touch anyone, Rebecca shouted, moving to block Carmen's path. You're not qualified to help passengers. You shouldn't even be working here. Carmen had reached her limit. Ma'am, I need you to sit down right now. You're preventing me from helping a passenger who needs assistance. I'll stand wherever I want to stand, Rebecca declared, crossing her arms defiantly. This is still a free country, last I checked. Carmen tried to step around Rebecca again to help the elderly gentleman, who was now leaning heavily on his cane and looking like he might fall. As Carmen moved past her, Rebecca suddenly stepped sideways to block her path more aggressively. Told you to stay away from me, Rebecca said, her face inches from Carmen's. Ma'am, please step back, Carmen said, her voice remaining professional despite the threatening tone Rebecca was using. Rebecca instead stepped closer. Make me. Go ahead. Try to make me move. I'd love to see you try. The entire cabin was watching. Now. Phones were recording from multiple angles. Children were staring wide-eyed at the adult throwing what amounted to a public tantrum at 30,000 feet. Carmen took a deep breath and tried one more time. Ma'am, I'm asking you nicely to return to your seat so I can help this gentleman. Please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. Difficult? Rebecca laughed bitterly. You want to know what's difficult? Flying on an American airline? And getting treated like garbage by people who probably can't even read the safety manual in English. That was the final straw. Carmen had endured the racist comments, the personal attacks, and the aggressive behavior, but Rebecca's latest comment crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Ma'am, I've been nothing but professional with you today, Carmen said, her voice steady but firm. I've tried to help you. I've been patient with your concerns, and I've done everything I can to make your flight comfortable. But I cannot allow you to continue disrupting other passengers or making inappropriate comments about the crew. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. Inappropriate? The only thing inappropriate here is having someone like you working on an American airline. You probably got this job because of some quota system. Real Americans can't even get hired anymore because companies have to hire people like you instead. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the airplane engines seemed quieter. Carmen stood perfectly still, her hands at her sides, her face calm despite the storm of emotion she was feeling inside. And then Rebecca made the mistake that would change everything. Maybe if you went back where you came from, Rebecca said, raising her hand as she spoke. Real Americans could get the jobs they deserve. The slap came so fast that nobody had time to react. Rebecca's palm connected with Carmen's cheek with a sharp crack that echoed through the cabin like a gunshot. Carmen stumbled backward, her hand flying to her face. Her cheek immediately turned red where Rebecca had struck her. The elderly gentleman behind them gasped and nearly dropped his cane. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody even seemed to breathe. Then all hell broke loose. The sound of the slap seemed to hang in the air forever. Carmen stood frozen, her hand pressed against her burning cheek, staring at Rebecca in complete shock. For a split second, the entire cabin was silent except for the steady hum of the airplane engines. Then chaos erupted. Oh my God, did she just hit her? A woman's voice called out from the back of the plane. Someone call security, shouted the businessman who had tried to defend Carmen earlier. The teenage girl who had been recording dropped her phone in surprise, then quickly picked it up to make sure she had captured everything. Her father was already standing, his face red with anger. "That's assault," he yelled at Rebecca. "You can't hit people." Rebecca seemed stunned by her own actions for a moment. She looked at her hand as if she couldn't believe what she had just done. But instead of apologizing or showing any remorse, she quickly became defensive. She was threatening me. "Rebecca," shouted to the cabin. "You all saw it. She was being aggressive and wouldn't leave me alone." Lisa rushed down the aisle from the front of the plane, her face pale with shock. "What happened? Carmen, are you okay?" Carmen nodded slowly, though her cheek was still bright red and her eyes were watering. "She hit me," Carmen said quietly, her voice shaking slightly. "She actually hit me." The elderly gentleman with the cane had managed to find a nearby empty seat and was shaking his head in disbelief. "I saw the whole thing," he announced to anyone who would listen. "That woman struck this flight attendant for no reason at all." More passengers were standing now, their voices creating a buzz of angry conversation throughout the cabin. Several people were holding up their phones, having recorded the incident from different angles. "Everyone sit down," Rebecca screamed, spinning around to face the cabin. "This is none of your business. She deserved it." A mother traveling with her young son covered the child's ears. "Lady, you need to calm down right now," she called out firmly. Lisa grabbed the phone from the galley and immediately called the cockpit. "Captain Rodriguez, we have a serious situation in the cabin. A passenger has physically assaulted one of our crew members." While Lisa was on the phone, Rebecca continued her tirade, seemingly oblivious to how serious her situation had become. "I want everyone to stop recording me right now," Rebecca demanded. "Delete those videos. You can't use them without my permission." The teenager's father stood up even taller. "We're in a public space, and you just committed a crime. These videos are evidence." "Crime?" Rebecca laughed, but there was a hysterical edge to her voice now. "I was defending myself. She was harassing me." Carmen was still standing in the aisle trying to process what had just happened. In 6 years of flying, she had never been physically attacked by a passenger. She had dealt with difficult people, drunk people, and even people who had made inappropriate comments about her background, but nothing had prepared her for this. Lisa finished her call to the cockpit and immediately went to Carmen's side. "Are you hurt? Do you need medical attention?" Carmen shook her head. "I think I'm okay. It just stings. I can't believe she actually hit me." "Well, believe it," said a man sitting in row 10. "We all saw it. That woman is completely out of control." Rebecca overheard the comment and whirled around to face him. "Out of control? I'm the only one here who understands what's happening. This airline is discriminating against American passengers." "No one is discriminating against you," Lisa said firmly, stepping protectively in front of Carmen. "You're drunk. You've been verbally abusive and now you've assaulted a crew member. This is a federal crime." "Federal crime?" Rebecca's voice cracked slightly. For the first time, she seemed to realize that her actions might have serious consequences. "That's ridiculous. It was barely a tap. She's being dramatic." The businessman who had defended Carmen earlier stood up and pointed at Rebecca. "Lady, I saw you wind up and slap her as hard as you could. That wasn't a tap, that was assault." From the front of the plane, they could hear Captain Rodriguez's voice over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing a situation in the cabin that requires immediate attention. Please remain in your seats and follow all crew instructions. We may need to divert to the nearest airport." Rebecca's face went white. "Divert? You can't divert the plane. Because of this, I have an important meeting in Los Angeles." "You should have thought about that before you hit someone," called out a woman from the middle of the plane. Lisa was helping Carmen to a crew seat near the front of the cabin, away from Rebecca. "Just rest here for a minute," Lisa said gently. "The captain is handling this." Behind them, Rebecca was becoming more agitated by the minute. "This is insane. I demand to speak to someone in charge. That woman provoked me." "Ma'am, you need to sit down immediately," called out a voice from the front of the plane. A tall man in a casual shirt and jeans was walking down the aisle toward Rebecca. Most of the passengers didn't recognize him, but Carmen and Lisa knew immediately who he was. "Federal Air Marshal," Lisa whispered to Carmen. He was sitting in first class. The air marshal approached Rebecca with calm authority. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to take your seat right now." Rebecca looked him up and down, taking in his casual appearance. "Who are you? You're not airline staff. You can't tell me what to do." The air marshal calmly reached into his jacket and showed her his badge. "Federal Air Marshal, sit down now." Rebecca's defiant expression cracked. "Federal Air Marshal? This is just a misunderstanding. I barely touched her." "Ma'am, I witnessed the entire incident. You struck a flight crew member. That's a federal offense. Please take your seat and remain calm while we sort this out." The cabin had gone quiet again, everyone watching as Rebecca slowly sank into her seat. She seemed to be realizing for the first time that she was in serious trouble. The air marshal remained standing near Rebecca's row while Lisa continued to tend to Carmen. "How are you feeling?" Lisa asked quietly. "Better," Carmen said, though her cheek was still red. "I just can't believe this happened. In all my years flying, I've never had someone actually hit me." "It's not your fault," Lisa said firmly. "You handled the situation perfectly. You stayed professional even when she was being completely inappropriate." From the front of the plane, Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have contacted air traffic control and will be making an unscheduled landing in Denver to address a security situation. We expect to be on the ground in approximately 40 minutes. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Rebecca's head snapped up. "Denver? No, I can't go to Denver. I have to be in Los Angeles today." The air marshal looked down at her. "Ma'am, you lost the right to make travel decisions when you assaulted a crew member." "Assaulted?" Rebecca's voice was getting shrill again. "It was barely a slap. People are being so dramatic about this." A passenger several rows away spoke up. "Lady, you hit someone who was just doing her job. That's not dramatic, that's criminal." Rebecca started to stand up again, but the air marshal immediately gestured for her to sit back down. "Ma'am, I strongly advise you to remain seated and quiet for the rest of this flight." "This is discrimination," Rebecca said desperately. "I'm being treated differently because I complained about poor service." "No," said the teenager's father. "You're being treated like someone who committed assault, because that's exactly what you did." The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom one more time. "Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for an early landing. We'll be beginning our descent into Denver International Airport shortly." As the plane started its descent, Rebecca sat in her seat looking pale and shaken. The reality of her situation was finally sinking in. The other passengers were quiet, but many were still holding their phones, having captured every moment of the incident. Carmen remained in the crew seat with Lisa checking on her regularly. The red mark on her cheek was starting to fade, but the shock of being assaulted was still fresh. The plane was heading for an emergency landing, and Rebecca was about to discover that actions have consequences, even at 30,000 feet. The wheels of Flight 247 touched down at Denver International Airport with a gentle thud that seemed much louder than usual in the tense cabin. Rebecca sat rigid in her seat, staring out the window at the unfamiliar airport where she definitely hadn't planned to be. The Federal Air Marshal remained standing nearby, his presence a constant reminder that her situation was far more serious than she had initially realized. Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom one final time. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived in Denver. Please remain seated until law enforcement has boarded the aircraft. We apologize for this unscheduled stop and appreciate your patience during this difficult situation." As the plane taxied toward the gate, Rebecca could see several police vehicles with flashing lights waiting on the tarmac. Her face went even paler as the reality of her situation fully hit her. "This is crazy," she muttered to herself. All this for one little slap. The passenger sitting across from her, an elderly woman who had witnessed the entire incident, shook her head in disgust. Little slap? Honey, you assaulted that poor girl and spent 2 hours making racist comments. This isn't crazy, this is justice. Rebecca turned to glare at the woman. Mind your own business. You don't understand what really happened here. I understand perfectly, the woman replied firmly. I've been flying for 50 years, and I've never seen anything as shameful as your behavior today. The plane came to a complete stop at the gate, but instead of the usual rush to get off, all the passengers remained seated as instructed. The tension in the cabin was thick as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Within minutes, the aircraft door opened, and several uniformed police officers boarded, followed by 2 FBI agents in dark suits. The sight of federal agents made Rebecca's hands start shaking. The lead FBI agent, a woman in her 40s with short brown hair, walked directly to where the air marshal was standing. They spoke quietly for a moment before the agent approached Rebecca's row. "Ma'am, I'm Agent Patricia Wells with the FBI. I need you to come with us," the agent said in a calm but authoritative voice. Rebecca looked around the cabin desperately, as if someone might come to her rescue. "This is a mistake. I want to call my lawyer." "You'll have the opportunity to call your lawyer once we get to the station," Agent Wells replied. "Right now, I need you to stand up slowly and come with us." "I'm not going anywhere until someone explains to me why the FBI is involved in this," Rebecca said, crossing her arms defiantly. The air marshal stepped forward. "Ma'am, assaulting a flight crew member is a federal crime. The FBI has jurisdiction over crimes committed on aircraft." Rebecca's defiance crumbled as the weight of the words federal crime sank in. "Federal crime? But I didn't mean to. It was just, she was being difficult." Agent Wells gestured toward the aisle. "Ma'am, please stand up. We can discuss this at the field office." With shaking legs, Rebecca stood up and began walking toward the front of the plane, escorted by the FBI agents and police officers. As she passed each row of passengers, she could feel their eyes on her. Some were still recording with their phones, capturing her walk of shame. When she reached Carmen, who was sitting in the crew seat near the front, Rebecca stopped. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Carmen looked up at her, with a mixture of sadness and disappointment. "You had so many chances to stop. All I ever tried to do was help you." Rebecca opened her mouth to say something else, but Agent Wells gently guided her forward. "Ma'am, we need to keep moving." As Rebecca was escorted off the plane, the passengers erupted in spontaneous applause. The sound echoed through the cabin as people clapped and cheered, showing their support for Carmen and their relief that justice was being served. "Good riddance," called out the businessman who had defended Carmen earlier. "That flight attendant deserves a medal for staying so professional," said another passenger. Once Rebecca was off the plane, Agent Wells returned to speak with Carmen and the other witnesses. "How are you feeling?" she asked Carmen gently. "Better now," Carmen replied, touching her cheek, which still showed a faint red mark. "I'm just glad it's over. I'm going to need to get a statement from you, and we'll want to collect any video evidence from passengers who recorded the incident," Agent Wells explained. The teenager's father immediately stepped forward. "I got the whole thing on video, the assault and everything that led up to it." Several other passengers also volunteered their recordings, eager to help ensure that Rebecca faced consequences for her actions. While the FBI collected evidence and statements, the passengers were finally allowed to deplane. Many stopped to thank Carmen personally as they left. "You handled that beautifully," said the elderly woman who had defended Carmen. That woman was completely out of line. "Thank you for staying so professional," said the mother traveling with her young son. "You showed real class." The teenager who had recorded the incident shyly approached Carmen. "I posted the video on social media. I hope that's okay. People need to see how airline workers get treated sometimes." Carmen smiled at her. "That's fine. Maybe it will help people understand that we're just trying to do our jobs." As the plane emptied, Captain Rodriguez came out of the cockpit to check on Carmen. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay, Captain. Thank you for handling everything so quickly." "Nobody should have to deal with that kind of treatment," he said firmly. The airline is going to support you 100% through this process. Meanwhile, at the Denver FBI field office, Rebecca was learning about the serious legal consequences of her actions. Agent Wells explained that assaulting a flight crew member was a federal felony that could result in up to 20 years in prison and fines of up to $250,000. 20 years? Rebecca gasped. For slapping someone? For assaulting a federal flight crew member, Agent Wells corrected. The law is very clear about this. Air travel safety depends on passengers respecting crew members who are responsible for everyone's safety. Rebecca's lawyer, whom she had finally been allowed to call, arrived 2 hours later looking grim. After speaking with his client privately, he emerged with a sobering assessment. The evidence against you is overwhelming, he told Rebecca. Multiple witnesses, video recordings, and the testimony of a federal air marshal. We need to start thinking about a plea agreement. Within hours, the videos of Rebecca's behavior and subsequent arrest had gone viral on social media. The hashtag #TalkYourJusticeForCarmen was trending, with millions of people expressing support for the flight attendant and outrage over Rebecca's racist comments and assault. Rebecca's employer, a major consulting firm, released a statement the next morning. We are aware of the disturbing incident involving one of our employees. This behavior does not reflect our company values and, effective immediately, Rebecca Williams has been terminated from her position. The news coverage was extensive, with legal experts explaining the serious federal charges Rebecca faced and the importance of protecting airline workers from passenger abuse. Carmen, meanwhile, received an outpouring of support from colleagues, passengers, and strangers around the world. The airline announced that they would be reviewing their policies for dealing with disruptive passengers and providing additional training for crew members on handling difficult situations. 6 months later, Rebecca pleaded guilty to assault on a flight crew member and was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison, along with a $50,000 fine and 5 years of probation. She was also permanently banned from flying on any commercial airline. Carmen continued working as a flight attendant, using her experience to advocate for better protections for airline workers. She spoke at industry conferences about the importance of treating airline employees with respect and the serious consequences of passenger misconduct. The incident became a landmark case in aviation law, demonstrating that racist behavior and violence against airline workers would not be tolerated. It served as a powerful reminder that actions have consequences, even at 30,000 feet, and that treating others with basic human dignity isn't just morally right. It's the law.